Okay, so here we are over at a bench place, and I've got the New Way Gizmatic set up here for refacing our valve. The valve has been coated and dried. So all I need to do is make sure this is backed off, drop this down gently into the center, and then gently snug up my bench vise, and then I'm going to rotate this in a clockwise direction. Very light pressure while I turn this, and this is going to raise the cutters into the bottom side of the valve face. Let me pull this out. Take a look. You can see I could use actually a little bit more cutting on the top side here and on the bottom side here, so maybe this head isn't as straight as I initially thought it was, and I need to clean up and face this valve a little bit. So let me clean my cutters and we'll do some more. Okay, so I got my brush to clean up my cutters. You might be able to see that they got packed with metal shavings pretty quickly. Set that down there. Self-centering on the valve, and it pinches the stem. Then I'm going to rotate this. And so you can see that perhaps my face was a little bit concaved. Of course, if I had just bought a new valve, probably wouldn't need to be worrying about this. And like I said, I'm on the fence about buying a new valve. I found a listing for a new one for $12 for a new stock replacement. I can tell you I did look around and I did find a listing for an oversized new old stock Tecumseh exhaust valve. However, they wanted $58 for it, plus I would need a piloted reamer and various other tools needed to ream out the guide, which I unfortunately don't have, as well as the time, because snow is coming and I'd like to be able to use my snowblower rather than shovel it. So I think I'm going to fix it, perhaps now with the stock valve, now that I'm refacing it, and run it for as long as I can while shopping around for a new unit. So we just take off small amounts at a time here. We don't want to jam up our cutters. You can see here that after the third pass it's getting a little bit closer, but I still have a little bit more to remove. Just about done. I would rather this process go slow and check frequently versus try to power through it and end up taking off more than I need to. So if it seems like I'm going slow and being overly cautious, well, it's because I am. And because I don't want to have to come back and buy a new valve after I just spent a bunch of time refacing this one, or have to do more corrective problems because I was hasteful. It's just a very little bit left on there, and I think I might leave that to the lapping process to finish. You see it leaves a pretty shiny finish though. Maybe one more quick cut. And so we can see that pretty much resolved that last little bit of machinist dye. And so the rest we should be able to finish with lapping. Okay, so back over at the engine now with the refaced valve and the seat, and both have been dyed. Go ahead and try to do our check here. Again, I want to check my valve lash, make sure I still have some, especially after refacing the valve, which it doesn't really want to spin on the seat easy, which is usually a sign that there's good contact, but at the same time I can't get a 4 in any longer, so let me try a 2 here. I can't even get a 2/1000 in here. So now we're going to have to go and open up the valve clearance by grinding a little bit off of the stem. Alright, I got us over at our Sioux valve grinder here, and we're going to take a little bit off the valve stem tip here. So the first thing I need to do is put it into the holder, touch it up against the grinding wheel to zero it out, hopefully. Okay. And then I'm going to use my dial here, and just like with the face and the seat, I want to go slow and take a couple off at a time and check. So I'll probably show you just one pass here to see how I do this, because this is going to be a couple of trips back and forth across the shop, and so rather than transporting you guys in the camera and setting up and moving and setting up, I'm just going to I'll show you what I'm doing, and then we'll meet back at the engine here. So right now I've got it kind of zeroed. I don't normally just dial it straight up to what I want. I like to take it off in small increments and sneak up on my desired clearance versus taking a ton off and then finding out that, whoops, I went a bit too far. So, turn the grinding head on. Bring it up just to make sure I'm zeroed here. And then I'm going to add a couple thou. Slowly raise this into the wheel. And so what this is going to do is grind the tip of the stem down, and it's going to leave me with a very smooth, very flat tip, like it should be for the engine. And so now we go check. Okay, so back over at the engine here, hold my valve down and checking my lash. I've got about 0.006 of lash, so that's, the range is from 4 to 10, and I'm at 6. So I've got plenty of room to grow, but I'm not right at the bottom edge of it, the specifications like I was before. So I'm going to pull this out. I'm going to put just a tiny amount of lapping compound on the face. I'm going to give it a final lap in and look at things here. Hopefully now we can see we've got a much narrower seat right about the middle of the valve face there. Got a much narrower, cleaner, rounder looking seat. If you look really close, you can see the 3 different angles. Okay, so that's the exhaust done. Technically, I don't have to do anything to intake because the intake was sealing. Although the lash was at the upper end of its limit for specifications at 10 thousandths lash. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process for the intake so I can kind of close up the valve lash a little bit and then just make sure that it will continue to seal and I don't have to come back in here unless I find a new valve and some service tools for it somewhere down the line. Probably fast forward to this part, so I'm not going to talk, but I'll record. See, there's the new intake valve face, and you can see that thin line right in the middle of it. I'd like it to be a little bit closer to the margin, but I think that's going to wear in okay. If I take my measuring tool now, look very closely here. Actually just a shade under 30 seconds, so I could stand to make a seat cut to widen the intake just a little bit. And my exhaust, just a shade over 1/32, which is about where I would like to be and what the specifications in the manual call for. 1/32 of an inch is just a shade over 32 thousandths, and our seat width is 35 to 45 thousandths. So I'm going to call the exhaust good. I will take a swipe off of the intake, and then it should be time to check final clearances and reassemble. Actually going to use a bit of soapy water here to wash down those metal shavings out of the port instead of brake clean here. So that's some soapy water, and this is just some regular water to rinse. Like I said, I'm going to change the oil after I'm done with the process, but feel fairly confident that the rags are going to get most of it. And I'm using this so that the metal shavings don't end up sticking and freezing to the metal like they might do with brake clean. Not too bad, still a fair amount of dryness. Again, I'll change the oil when I'm all said and done here. There we go. So you can see here, the top cut still has a little bit of purple dye on it yet. But best I can hold you guys at the straight ahead angle. We're just a shade over a 32nd here for a seat width. And you can see the bottom narrowing cut there that's still covered in machinist dye. So we've got a much narrower, straighter, rounder seat. And see if we can do the intake as well. Intake, the dye is off the top cut here, but let me see if I get that lined up right. Right at about a 32nd for the intake seat width as well. A little close up after the cleaning. So I guess all that's left to do is go ahead and reassemble everything, make sure our final valve lash specifications are good to go, and we'll reassemble and retest. Alright, so I got the cylinder head bolted down, torqued it down to about 100 inch-pounds. Hopefully that should be enough to get it to seal up. The valves are installed. The final lash is 6 thousandths. It's a bit of a tight 6 on the exhaust and a bit of a loose 6 on the intake, but they're both pretty close to 6, and so far I'm happy with that. It's time to go ahead and set up our cylinder leak down tester and check and see if we have any leakage out of either of the valves. Okay, so I'll hook that up. Got my regulator backed off. Hopefully you guys can see this and hear this. Hook up my air. And it looks like I've only got about 94 psi for inlet pressure here. You can see we got some blow by through the piston rings in the crankcase, but it's pretty low, which is pretty good. Okay. This is the intake here. Hope you can hear it. There's no change in tone here. And this is the exhaust. And there's a little bit coming out of the crankcase right here, which is where the oil drain back is. I'm not picking up anything out of the exhaust here. So, there we have it. The intake valve clearance is better. The exhaust valve clearance is good. The valve seat is now good in its sealing, and it's ready to finish reassembly. So, we'll come back when everything's reassembled, ready to test fire. Alright, so the oil's been freshly changed, and I thought I'd bring you back for a conclusion here. Everything's reassembled and it's ready to test fire. So let me go ahead and hit the exhaust, and we'll see how well it starts. especially for a 42-year-old unit. I guess the final test would be to put it outside and cold soak it for a couple hours and then try to start it and make sure that it starts just as well when it's freezing cold out. Okay, so that concludes the Simplicity 560 project. A couple of final thoughts on the valve job and the valve guide. Definitely want to repair a worn out valve guide before proceeding with a valve cutting job. It'll definitely turn out a better finished product. It'll probably go a lot quicker and easier. Of course, I skipped the whole valve guide repair due to lack of availability of tools and replacement parts, as well as shortened time frame since we're going to be getting snow in a couple of hours, and I'm hoping to take this home and use it once it starts piling up in my driveway. So I will back burner the valve guide repair until I can find the materials and or maybe a new good engine to replace it with. Anyways, hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.